My name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. Let me go ahead and set my mouse so that way my screen doesn't automatically turn off. Okay. So, hi. I actually have gotten my new glasses in, so hopefully I won't have to adjust them as much because they'll actually fit. Just fixing the lighting on this. So you'll notice that these are a little bit lighter than my old ones. I have darker ones for when my eyes hurt, so I have levels now. So we'll see if I have to switch over with all the light in here. But I'm hoping I can save this other pair for when I actually have migraines. Just wanted to do a long overdue review of Rush. I finished this, I don't have my library card in here, finished this earlier in the month. I do have what came with the book. They had a little library card in there already. I decided not to mess with that, leave that one alone, although I could have used that. This came from David M. Hunt Library, Falls Village, Connecticut. Never been there. But I do love a good former library book. And this came in really good shape. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I have my notes here just because there's a lot that I enjoyed about this book. First of all, he seemed to be very progressive, very forward-thinking for his time. He, in areas such as mental health, in race relations, women's education, he was an abolitionist. He was very much involved in helping the freed slaves set up their own church in Philadelphia, even though he got some blowback for that. He was also known for being open-minded when it came to religion. He liked talking to other people about their beliefs, and that could be anywhere from talking to Christians of different denominations, could be him talking to Jefferson about his beliefs and encouraging him to write about his beliefs. And after Rush was gone, Adams took his place in encouraging Jefferson to write about his beliefs, which is where we get the Jefferson Bible, where he chopped out the things that he didn't like. I believe that when I was reading in the book, it said like the miracles was what he particularly didn't want in there. When Rush was in France, he'd stop by different churches and go to their services. I think it was in France. It might have been England. Anyway. And then mental health is the one thing that he was especially known for. Well, that and his dealing with the smallpox epidemic. And I need a haircut because my bangs keep getting in my eyes. He was one of those people who was very passionate about things, and sometimes he could go on and on to the point where people just kind of got tired of hearing him talk. And because he also held such strong beliefs, he could rub people the wrong way. On the other hand, he was very capable of developing very deep attachments with other people, as evidenced by his friendship with John Adams particularly, but his friendship with Thomas Jefferson to a lesser extent. I was very struck by him. Sorry, I want to have a place to put my tea cover. It's going to take a while to get out of the habit of pushing up my glasses. Anyway, when the yellow fever epidemic, was it yellow fever? I thought it was smallpox. Hold on. Let me do quick peek. I might have it wrong in my notes. Oh, I have a note here that Rush had a habit of annotating his books, which is kind of fun. So I have an annotation about him annotating. Just trying to find where, because now I'm questioning my memory. Alright, sorry about that. I was correct. I should have trusted my memory and my notes. Yellow fever was what he dealt with specifically. The reason I got confused is I'm currently reading The Contagion of Liberty, which is dealing with the smallpox epidemic, which was going on around the same time period. And Rush did emphasize to Washington the importance of getting the soldiers inoculated for smallpox. So, but that's why I got a little confused, is because I'm reading about smallpox, but Rush's main, one of his big contributions was he stayed in Philadelphia during the outbreak of yellow fever, when even quite a few physicians fled. He was also known for not charging people and seeing whoever needed help. Even when he himself had yellow fever, he kept saying to his patients, to the point where some of them had, I think it was bread and milk ready for him because they knew that he would get lightheaded. So they basically would be like, "Okay, here, doc, here's your, here's your snack to kind of keep you going." But I felt like that said a lot about his character, that yes, it was about making money insofar as, he had a living to make. But when it came to the yellow fever, when so many people needed help and money wasn't necessarily something that everyone had to, not everyone could pay for treatment, and that wasn't an issue for him. He was a physician first and foremost. And this really did affect his finances. It took him a little while to come back from that. There's also a quote that I have of his that I really liked. And actually I happen to be open to that page. It's page 352. I think I might even have the wrong page written down. Oh no, I do have the right page written down in my notes. Anyway, page 352. Each day Rush was astonished to still be alive. Morning prayers had never seemed so moving and resonant as he did them on his way to absurdly early house calls. While waiting for Rebecca, I believe that's his sister's name, to give him a quick breakfast before leaving, he jotted down a few lines to Julia, and his wife Julia had been sent away to Stanford. But there was a knock at on the door. "Adieu," he scribbled. "The delay of a minute seems a year to a patient after a physician is sent for." And I love that quote. The delay of a minute seems like a year to a patient after a physician is sent for. This was a phenomenon that I did notice both as a nurse and later on as a patient in the hospital. So when there would be a patient who would hit the call bell, there were times where I might have seen the call bell go off and immediately walked over there, and I would have a patient be like, "Oh my gosh, what took you so long?" Couldn't have gotten there any faster unless I teleported. But if you're in pain, even regardless as to whether it is a physical pain related to surgery, something medically going on, or the pain of an addiction to narcotics, benzos, whatever, there is still, even when there's addiction, a level of suffering there. And actually that level can cause even more irritability. So as difficult as it can be to work with that kind of patient, there is suffering there as well. I also would notice when, particularly somewhat with my first neurosurgery, but the second one was much more difficult. My first one was a fusion, C1, C2, so right back here. The other one I had something called tether cord, tether cord surgery. So I needed to have it tether cord release. Excuse me, that was what I was looking for. So just needed to have that taken care of. That was much more of a painful surgery, partially because of the location, which was lower spine, mid to lower spine, and it required laying flat. And if you've ever had to lay flat for days on end, it can be incredibly painful, especially since I was also having migraines at the time because it was too bright of a room. All that to say is when I finally got to the point where I couldn't hold out anymore and I needed to hit the call button, because I hated hitting the call button. I know how busy nurses can get. But once I hit the call button, it would seem like it would take so long because of how much pain I was in. So this sort of empathy that Dr. Rush had really speaks to him, besides the fact that he wasn't charging people. This quote speaks to him as a person. Because there could be doctors who would go out and be focused on helping people, but not necessarily put themselves personally into their patient's shoes in quite that way. They might think, oh, this person's really sick, they need help, but might think of it more from a clinical aspect. Rush had the gift of not only looking at things from a clinical point of view, but from the personal point of view. So yes, I love this quote because it is an insight into Rush the man. The delay of a minute seems a year to a patient after a physician is sent for. Very simple, but says so much. Going on about him and his medical contributions, he offered the first modern descriptions of the effects of chronic alcohol use, which is pretty amazing. He noted that after the war, there was an uptick in what he would call the spirits. So he had a chart. Okay, so he created, such a nerd, he created a chart that's kind of like a temperature chart where it rated, first of all, he did this when he was courting Julia, that rated like different levels of love. Well, he set up a similar thing to explain mental illness, and it included alcoholism and the effects on the mind and body. And he had a difference between like a wine or a mead, and then the spirits that had a higher alcohol content and had a worse effect on the body because of the concentration of alcohol in it. He avoided those spirits and would stick to the less potent alcohol when he would have alcohol. But he was a huge proponent of getting people not to drink as much of the spirits because there was alcoholism actually being an issue among the medical staff in the hospital in Philadelphia. I think because of what they had seen during the war, probably that was a huge aspect to that. He, talking about the war, he got into with Washington. With another point where his speaking his mind and his impetuosity just got him in trouble. He wrote letters passionately and without thinking about the fact that this could work against him sometimes, and he would just write off letters. In this case, it was something to Patrick Henry that not only complained about the fact that it didn't seem like Washington was listening to his concerns about the hygiene among the troops and other precautions that could be taken to help with the health of the troops. So he's complaining about that, but he's also complaining about Washington as a general, and if maybe someone else to be better equipped for that role. And he mentioned Conway, so people were already concerned about the Conway cabal. So when there's more talk about that, Patrick Henry, he didn't give away Rush's name, but he did show Washington the letter, and Washington recognized the handwriting. And even to Washington's death, he never could trust Rush again. It seemed to be because he got competition among the military, but Rush's letters seemed to him to be more of a personal attack. So, yeah, even to his death, there ended up always being a divide between the two of them. Honestly, I recommend reading through this book because this covers things like the way that the British treated American prisoners or the wounded on the field. There were points where they would just leave them to die, or they would go back and injure them again. The torture of Mercer, who they thought was Washington, he died from the torture he received. The torture of Rush's father-in-law, Stockton, when they caught him, they recognized his name from the Declaration of Independence. And when he was finally released, he was a shell of the man he was prior to that. And this was something that was always in the back of Rush's mind as a signer of the Declaration of Independence. He barely escaped when the British took Philadelphia, and he was caring for patients there. So he and another doctor barely escaped, and Rush knew if he was caught, he was in danger of receiving the same treatment as his father-in-law. But there was a lot in here that I hadn't heard before. I really wasn't familiar with Rush prior to this book, which is a shame. As for his more into his contributions in mental health, even though his theories weren't always right as time went on, he was someone who really focused on how can we make this more humane. This isn't a moral failing or a possession. What are the factors that we are looking at? Can this be hereditary? Sadly, Rush's own son, his eldest son John, ended up becoming mentally ill, and he spent the rest of his life in the mental asylum because he just wasn't able to safely live out by himself. He had killed a fellow sailor, and that seemed to be what finally pushed him over the edge, although he was always a bit erratic. He was always a bit of a concern, bit of a headache child for John, which is a shame because for Rush, which is a shame because John had shown so much promise when he was younger. He shared his father's interest in mental health as a child. I think when he followed his father when he was about 10 years old, there's an example given in the book. And so it's just really sad what happened to him. But I'm just glancing through my notes. There's a couple quotes about the friendship of Adams and Rush. So one of them is... here it is. Julia teased Rush about how important the letters between Rush and Adams had become to the men over the years. To her, they seemed less like founding fathers trading wisdom than two young girls writing about their sweethearts. And then there's another quote from the book. 223 letters they had exchanged since reconnecting in 1805. So this doesn't even count their letters before that, which they wrote constantly during the war and such. Letters their wives loved to watch them retrieve from the post because they were so excited to open them. It actually made it really sad that Adams, he kept looking in the mailbox disappointed because he hadn't gotten a letter from Rush in a little while and he was due. So it's described, I guess, by Abigail that he opened the mailbox, looked in, didn't see anything from Rush, but he pulled out another letter, and it was from a medical student they both knew that was letting Adams know that Rush had passed, and by the time John Adams found out, Rush was already buried. But I thought that was kind of a little sad personal note that Adams was, while he was looking forward to a letter from Rush, Rush was already gone. And they had always expected Adams, who was older than Rush, to go first. And he had had his own health issues. They never expected Rush to go first of the two of them. But I also thought it was interesting, something I learned here is that Jefferson and Adams died the same day, which is crazy. I believe it was July 4th. I had to go back and look, but that was just one of those crazy things. I have a couple other points I wanted to end on, even though there's so many things that I still feel like I wasn't able to touch just because there's so much here. I read last year, I want to say, a book about a resurrectionist, and it came up towards the end of this book. After Rush had been buried, Dr. Physic, he was just sort of ruminating a few hours after Rush's funeral when a resurrectionist asked Dr. Physic, and I guess this was a co-worker of Rush's, might have even been a student. He asked Dr. Physic, a former student, I think, if he wanted Rush's body. Well, actually, the resurrectionist started with, do you want Dr. Rush? And Dr. Physic stared at him. He's like, he's dead. And the resurrectionist was like, yeah, do you want him? And that was when Physic realized, oh my gosh, he needs his body. Physic, shocked and terrified, told the man that he was not interested and that he should leave Rush's body alone. And after that, Physic, apparently when he died later, he had set up in his will that his body was to be guarded in his gravesite, so that way he would not have his body snatched by a resurrectionist. Which was really interesting considering the fact that Rush and Physic probably both had benefited from having bodies that were provided to them. I had not heard as much about Rush doing that simply because he ended up moving into mental health, but I do wonder if he had some dealing with that earlier on. I know that he dealt a lot with, was it chemistry? His focus, he didn't seem to be an anatomist. That's not how it's anatomist. Darn. He didn't seem to be focused on anatomy. I'm not going to say the word that I wanted to correctly, so I'm not going to even try. I think it's fitting, though, to allow John Adams, Rush's good friend, to give the last words on Rush. So first of all, if you didn't know, this book mentions that Rush got Adams and Jefferson to start writing to each other and reconnect as friends because they had kind of been estranged. So Adams, writing to Jefferson after Rush's death, said, I lament with you the loss of Rush. I know of no character living or dead who has done more real good in America. And then to Richard Rush, another son, or a son of Dr. Rush, Adam stated, Dr. Rush was a greater and better man than Dr. Franklin, yet Rush was always persecuted, and Franklin always adored. Why is not Dr. Rush placed before Dr. Franklin in the Temple of Fame? Because cunning is a more powerful divinity than simplicity. Rush has done infinitely more good to America than Franklin. Both have deserved a high rank among benefactors to their country and mankind, but Rush by far the greatest. And I just think that that's a very fitting way to end this little bit of a meandering review. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It's a long book, but there's a lot of good stuff in here. The writing style is very easy, very engaging, but it's also is very informative. It's a shame that Dr. Rush doesn't get the attention that he deserves. Like I said, I really didn't know anything about him. I picked up this book, I think on a whim, because I hadn't heard anything about him. So, yes, I would recommend this highly. This will be a book that I will no doubt read again because I thoroughly enjoyed this. Even though sometimes he frustrated me because of his impetuosity and sometimes his passion could kind of not cloud his mind, but kind of carry him away. So sometimes he caused issues by just being so darn passionate about things, and honestly, I can relate to Rush, even though I think that he was less diplomatic than he could have been. But his curiosity, his passion, his focus on patient care, his empathy, there's so much that I can connect to with Rush. I can respect in him. This is a man that I would gladly spend more time with by reading him again, like visiting an old friend. So, yes, if you want to meet a founding father who doesn't get the attention that he deserves, I recommend this book. Rush, Revolution, Madness, and the Visionary Doctor Who Became a Founding Father. Stephen Fried, however it's pronounced. Check it out if this sounds to you to be up your alley. Anyway, that's it for this review. I was going to review Johnson Flood in this, but I had a feeling that this might run a bit long, so I will go ahead and stop this video and do Johnstown Flood in a different video. Thank you very much for joining me. Hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. God bless. Bye.